You are now watching a summary of Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. Main characters in the novel: Frances Price, mother of Fanny; Fanny Price, protagonist of the story; Sir Thomas Bertram, landowner and Fanny's uncle; Lady Bertram, aunt of Fanny and wife of Sir Thomas; Tom Bertram, oldest heir to Bertram family; Edmund Bertram, younger son of Bertram family; Maria Bertram, oldest daughter of Bertram family; Julia Bertram, younger daughter of Bertram family; Mrs. Norris, sister to Fanny's mother and Lady Bertram; Mr. and Mrs. Grant, new preacher and neighbor; Mary Crawford, sister of Mrs. Grant; Henry Crawford, Mary's brother; William Price, Fanny's brother; Rushworth, Maria's fiancé; Susan Price, younger sister of Fanny; Yates, good friend of Tom Bertram. 30 years ago, the marriages of three ward sisters happened, and they respectively became Lady Bertram, Mrs. Norris and Mrs. Price. By marrying Sir Thomas Bertram, Lady Bertram gained title, and Mrs. Norris married the Reverend Norris, while Mrs. Frances Price ended up marrying a poor drunk naval officer. Lady Bertram and Mrs. Norris lived nearby in Mansfield Park. They hadn't heard from their third sister for long until one day a letter arrived. Mrs. Price was begging her sisters to take care of one of her older children as she was expecting again. Lady Bertram, Sir Thomas and Mrs. Norris decided to take care of Mrs. Price's oldest daughter Fanny, not out of greatness but rather out of pride. Mrs. Norris made excuses not to take Fanny in, so the Bertrams became responsible for her. Fault of being born in a lower-class family, the protagonist, Fanny Price, is hence traded to her aunt Lady Bertram's place by her own mother, who cannot afford to raise her. She gets into a whole new world of the Bertram family where everything is grand and extravagant. As quoted, she is afraid of everybody, ashamed of herself, and longing for the home she had left. She knew not how to look up and could scarcely speak to be heard or without crying. Coming from a small background family, Fanny is not ungrateful, but she is rather afraid in this new space that revolves around materialistic concerns more than human connections. Sir Thomas Bertram and Lady Bertram saw it as very important to create a fine line of difference between Fanny and their children, Tom, Edmund, Maria, and Julia. While the Bertram children were being educated and well taken care of, Fanny on the other hand was being treated as a servant, attending to Lady Bertram's demands. Fanny's two cousins and Mrs. Norris never fail to remind her of her class and makes fun of her. One day, overwhelmed by emotions, Fanny burst into tears, and Edmund kindly comforted her. They soon became good friends. With his companionship, she became happy even with Julia and Maria's constant teasing. Nonetheless, the Bertrams seemed to appreciate the woman she was becoming. Growing up, she becomes accustomed to the rich lifestyle, keeping company with Lady Bertram when her cousins are out socializing. Eventually, Mr. Norris dies and Mrs. Norris moves in nearby. It is revealed that the fortune Edmund was supposed to inherit must be kept aside to pay off the debts of Tom, who had issues with gambling. A new preacher, Dr. Grant, and Mrs. Grant moved nearby. For business purposes, Sir Thomas has to leave for Antigua. He takes Tom with him in an attempt to elevate his sense of responsibility. Meanwhile, Maria Bertram attracts the attention of the wealthy Mr. Rushworth. Mr. Rushworth asks for her hand in marriage and she agrees. Upon hearing this news, Sir Thomas is thrilled. He orders that they wait until his return for the wedding. Two new people arrive at Mansfield Park, Henry and Mary Crawford. They are the neighbor Mrs. Grant's half-siblings. They are attractive and share the same status in the society with the Bertrams, and so they fit perfectly into the circle of Mansfield. Tom returns at Mansfield. Sir Thomas will return in the late fall. Despite the fact that Maria Bertram is engaged to Rushworth, Henry flirts with her, and even at times flirts with her sister Julia. The Bertrams, the Crawfords and Fanny make a trip to Rushworth's estate where Henry flirts with Maria, leaving Julia disappointed. As for Mary Crawford, she was first interested in Tom Bertram as he was the eldest heir to the Bertram fortune, but once she realized that he was a boring man, she progressively gets attracted to Edmund. Edmund also develops a liking for her, and that upsets Fanny. Even if she cannot admit it to herself, Fanny finds herself falling in love with her cousin. A friend of Tom Bertram, Yates, while paying a visit suggests that they all should act out a play for entertainment. Everybody is enthusiastic about it except for Edmund and Fanny, who hate the idea of acting. Eventually, Edmund joins the play. Edmund and Mary fall deeper in love, but that is torture to Fanny as she watches them perform love scenes. However, for a dress rehearsal, Fanny also ends up getting a part in the play when Mrs. Grant had to leave to care for her sick husband. Fanny was just being forced into this when Sir Thomas makes an entrance. He came back from Antigua and was clearly not happy about the immodesties. The play is brought to an end. Maria was hoping for Henry to ask her hand for marriage, but when it does not happen, she gives up, and marries Rushworth. Julia and Maria set off to London with Rushworth. Since even Julia is gone, Henry decides to seduce Fanny for fun, but Fanny is secretly in love with Edmund. While Edmund tries to understand whether Mary would marry him or not since she is unwilling to commit with poor aspirations like being a clergyman, William, the brother of Fanny, pays a visit. Since Sir Thomas' return, he is warm towards Fanny, admiring the gentle woman she has grown into. He decides to throw a ball in her name. Henry failed at seducing Fanny, but he falls in love with her for real. In an attempt to impress Fanny, Henry leaves for London to secure a promotion for her brother, William. Then, he proposes to Fanny, who ultimately rejects him, which makes Sir Thomas disappointed. Fanny then returns back to Portsmouth, where her real family lives. Accustomed to the lifestyle at Mansfield, she hates Portsmouth, but she becomes a friend of her younger sister, Susan. Henry even visits her there to tell her again about his feelings. Fanny warms at his efforts and Mary Crawford encourages her. However, shortly after, she gets the news that Tom Bertram is gravely sick. With worries, she wishes to return to Mansfield. She then hears about the rumors that Henry Crawford and Maria ran away together. Edmund confirms the news in a letter and even adds that Julia and Mr. Yates have also eloped. Fanny returns to Mansfield along with her sister Susan. Edmund talks to Mary Crawford about the affair between Maria and Henry. He is despised when Mary does not condemn their actions but complains about how they were caught. To the delight of Fanny, a disgusted Edmund ends his ties with Mary. Henry is excluded from the Bertrams. A disgraced Maria has to leave Mansfield to leave with Mrs. Norris, Julia and Mr. Yates. Mr. Yates asks for forgiveness to Sir Thomas and is forgiven. The Grants and Mary Crawford move to settle in London. For the first time ever, Edmund sees Fanny in a romantic way and falls in love. They eventually marry and lead a content life. And that's how the narrative ends, with a happy ending. Thanks for watching.